Hi folks, I'm Alex, affectionately known to some in my workplace as Dr. Alex because I've got a PhD. My PhD is in chemistry and I studied for it at Cardiff University between 2015 and 2019. And I want to talk to you for a little bit about what it's like to study chemistry or other sciences at university, and then tell you a little bit about studying for a PhD as well. But first I want to talk to you a little bit more about me, my background and where I'm from. As you may be able to hear, I am originally from Birmingham, in a not so great area where people occasionally get bricked in the face and my local pizza shop got shut down because somebody got stabbed outside of it. I'm from a single parent family. Dad left when I was 11, so it's just been me and Mum for a while, and I'm the first in my family to go to university. My sister had kids young, neither of my parents went, my uncles didn't go, so I was the first. And the fact that I was the first did help me out financially, but that's something I'll come on to in a minute. So after my GCSEs, I went to sixth form college to study A-levels in English language and literature, German, Spanish and chemistry. And as you might be able to tell there, chemistry's sort of the odd one out. And that's because when I first went to college, I'd planned to go on to university afterwards and study languages. And chemistry was always my fun subject that I studied because I enjoyed it. After my first year at college, I dropped Spanish and focused on English, German and chemistry. And here's a point that I want to bring up. Plans change. I had my heart set on studying languages. But the reason that I changed was because we had a careers event at college. I spoke to some science graduates and I was amazed by the breadth of career options that were available to me as a science graduate. And that's what really persuaded me to go into university to study sciences. Now, because I didn't study maths or physics at A-level, I thought the unis I could apply to for science were a bit more limited. So I did my research and eventually applied to Leeds, York, Nottingham, Sussex and the University of East Anglia. York rejected me, but I got offers from the rest of them and I eventually went on to the University of Leeds. I got ABB at A-levels, but a lot of people on my course got in through clearing. So if on results day things don't turn out quite how you want them to, there are still a lot of good unis with science courses available on clearing. The second thing I want to point out is that the admissions process for universities is often a lot more flexible than you think it is. I discounted applying to Cardiff because I didn't have maths, and the website said you needed maths. But when I went to Cardiff for my PhD, there were a lot of people there that I met that were either current students studying chemistry or PhD students that had studied at Cardiff for their undergrad, and they hadn't studied maths. They'd, like me, had to do a short top-up module in the first semester just to make sure that your maths skills were up to scratch for how they needed to be to study chemistry. But I'm by no means a mathematician at all. I'm still underneath a bit of a linguist, still keep up my German and my Spanish. So it didn't really go to my detriment that I didn't have maths. Talking about the admissions process being a bit more flexible, admissions tutors are people, and a lot of them really want you to go to their university. They want you to choose their university over other ones. So they'll often consider your application even if you don't strictly meet the requirements that they've got listed online. So don't let that put you off taking a chance. If there's somewhere you know you love and you'd love to go and study, consider picking them as a UCAS choice, even if you don't completely meet the requirements, because they might still offer you a place. So off I went to Leeds and I studied an integrated master's degree, which means I studied for 4 years in total and got a master's degree at the end of it. The first 3 years were the same as if I'd studied for a bachelor's degree, and then the fourth year was so I could get my master's. And now I mentioned earlier that being the first in my family to go on to university did help me out financially. At Leeds, I got a bursary and I got a scholarship on top of my student loans. And my bursary was because I was the first in my family to go to university. Some universities will offer these, so it's always worth checking, if you're considering going on to higher education, the different kind of options there are for financial help available. I mentioned that I also got a scholarship, And the criteria for that scholarship was that I got 3 A's at A level. And we've already established that I didn't. I got ABB. But quite often, these scholarships come from pots of money that the university doesn't always get to keep if they don't give it out to students. So the criteria can be a bit more flexible sometimes. So it's definitely worth checking for these scholarships. A lot of the time, they're also ones that you'll have to apply for yourself, so you're not automatically entered for them. So it's always worth, once you've assigned either your firm or your insurance choices, applying for the scholarships, and you can find information about those on their websites. Now, the part of my degree that I enjoyed most was the practical lab modules. The great thing about science is that, I'm sure you'll agree with this, you can see it happening. You can see the things you're learning about. If you do a flame test, you can see the difference between the metals by the colour of that flame. It's a visual subject, something that you can really take in your hands and see the effects of in front of you. And the majority of science courses will have labs as part of the assessment, even ones you might not necessarily expect to, like psychology. They will still have a laboratory component. And in chemistry, labs make up quite a high proportion of the assessment because of how many practical skills there are to learn and practice. And it was the highlight of my degree. It was the thing I enjoyed most. I just still do love donning a big white lab coat and a pair of safety specs and watching science happen in front of me. When I was at Leeds, bearing in mind this was a few years ago, so it might have changed, I did 12 hours of practical lab time a week as part of my degree. And at Cardiff, because during my time as a PhD student, I was paid to supervise undergraduate lab sessions, the students there used to do between 8 and 12 hours of lab time a week. But again, this might have changed, so it's always worth checking. And that's the kind of thing that's worth checking if you go on an open day, for example. Ask about how much lab time is involved. Science courses tend to involve more contact time than some other degrees. By contact time, I mean lectures, tutorials, seminars, and lab time. So you'll often find that you could be in more than some of the people that you end up living with. The only course I met that was in for more hours than chemistry was medicine. And I tended to be in for a maximum of 30 hours a week, which may sound a lot, but if you think about it, that's 9 till 3 every day. So that's really not bad. And now I'm going to be honest with you, there were parts of my degree that I found difficult. And I failed a lot of my exams. A lot of my exams. And I was even told during my 3rd year that I'd likely really struggle with the 4th year, probably almost definitely fail. And so they recommended that I dropped down to the 3-year course and graduated with a bachelor's degree. I said no. I knew that in my 4th year I had to do a research project in a proper research laboratory, meaning I was working on things that nobody else had worked on. And it was a year of practical lab work. That was what I'd loved doing for the last 3 years, so I wasn't going to back away from that and miss out on it completely. So I went from loving chemistry in my A-levels, struggling with it for some of my degree, so it's safe to say that I'd sort of fallen out of love with it a bit. So 4th year was make or break, and I loved every minute of it. It completely made up for the first 3 years being a little bit tougher. And now that I'd fallen back in love with it, I didn't want to give it up. I wanted to do more of what I enjoyed. And not only that, but the friends I made at university are the ones that I still see now. I'm 27, so was at uni a few years ago, but I still chat with, do virtual quizzes with, go and visit and go on holiday with the people that I met on the first day of university. So after my integrated masters at Leeds, I went on to do my PhD at Cardiff. And a PhD for chemistry and for a lot of the sciences and engineering and things like that involves 3 or 4 years of doing research, for me, in a laboratory, mixing chemicals together, trying to see what happens, explaining why that happened, that didn't. But not only that, you're surrounded by people that are in exactly the same boat as you. They'll share in your successes. They'll help you out with things that you're having trouble with. And it's a whole bunch of you going through exactly the same things. And just as the friends I made at Leeds are still really important to me, I still chat with, go abroad to visit and go on holiday with people that I met at Cardiff as well. So one of the other reasons I decided to do a PhD was because I love that educational environment. I love learning. So I wanted to go and do more of it. My PhD itself was in inorganic materials chemistry. And it's alright if that doesn't mean much to you. All it really means is that I used different metals. So the ones particularly I used were copper, zirconium and scandium to try and make things that I can manipulate the properties of. And what I was trying to do in particular was make molecular sponges that changed size and shape when I shone different coloured lights on them. And you might ask why I wanted to do that. Well, we know that problems such as air and light pollution are ones that we really face as a society. So, my sponges could take up air, they could take up water, they could take up different things. And they can take up the pollutants in air and water. And if we wanted to soak up these nasties, shine a light on them to change the shape of the sponge and trap them in that sponge, then later on we could remove my sponges, take them somewhere else, shine a different coloured light on them, change that structure again and release those pollutants. Selectively release them, whether it's somewhere that we can further treat them or store them and dispose of them safely. I was part of a small research group when I was at Cardiff, so there were people working on similar projects to me. But now that I'm gone, there's another student working on making my sponges even better. So it's nice to know that all the work I did is being used and carried on with now that I'm left. One of the other great things about my PhD is that it was fully funded, which means I didn't pay tuition fees and I got paid a salary to live while I was there. So I could live pretty comfortably without working alongside. Not all PhDs are funded, but a lot of them, particularly in science and engineering, are. So if it's something that you're interested in, it's definitely worth checking it out. But what are other benefits of doing a PhD? Well, you're part of an international community, meaning there are a lot of people around the world trying to learn about similar things. That means that there are big events called conferences where everyone comes together to present the research they're doing and talk about the things they've been working on. And I've been to conferences in London, Southampton, Durham, Oxford and Cambridge. The best one was when I got to go to New Zealand. And that was fantastic. And I got to go there because I was going to this conference with my PhD. And as part of my PhD, I was also part of the STEM Ambassador Programme. So I delivered science activities at festivals, primary schools, secondary schools, colleges. And that's where I realised my passion for teaching people science. I knew I loved science, and then I realised that I love teaching people about it so they can discover that passion for themselves. That's why I thought a great career for me would be outreach and engagement, where I get to help people discover passion and excitement about things that they might not have thought about. And that's not what my PhD taught me to do, but it's a skill I discovered when I was doing it. So it's something I only realised because I'd done my PhD. And that's where I am now. My job involves helping young people like yourselves make the best decisions for their future and make sure that they've got as much information to make an informed decision. I wake up every day really excited to go to work because I feel like I'm making a difference. And if there's a few pieces of advice I can give you, do something you enjoy. It makes getting out of bed in the morning a lot easier if you're going to do something that you want to do. And the second piece of advice is don't be disheartened if things get a little bit tough. The harder you work, the greater the reward that you'll reap. I hope this has been helpful, and as always, if you want to ask any further questions, you can find me on the Ask page on the High Horizons website. Thanks for listening to this, and I wish you all the best for the future.